wanted to jump on this Friday evening, talk to you about some data engineering myths. So you've probably heard some of these before and want to debunk some of them about what data engineering is really like in the real world, right? So as always, if you have any questions, feel free to stop and say hello. Let me know down in the comments that you're here, and happy to see you. So you've probably heard this one. Data engineering, that's just building pipelines, right? Or maybe the tech giants care about all that stuff. It's not for me, right? Well, I'm Chris, and I've spent the last 25 years building everything from messy Excel nightmares to modern cloud architectures. And let me tell you, I learned the hard way, especially in the beginning, how dangerous that these myths can be. So stick around because one myth nearly tanked an entire sales quarter for my company. And I'm going to share that story in just a bit. So as we go, I want to know which of these myths have you run into at your job? So if you're on live now, let me know down in the comments. If you're watching the replay, let me know down in the comments of the video. So drop it in the comments. Let me know which of these myths have you run into in your own career, in your own job. So number one, it's just coding and pipelines, right? So sure, I absolutely write Python, I write various code, but the real data engineering is all about designing the entire ecosystem, making sure that data flows, that quality holds up, and that the business is actually getting what it needs. If you think that is just about scripts and DAGs, you're missing like 90% of what the job really is. So, again, it is really a lot about the relationship with the business and making sure that you're answering the right business questions that are being asked and interpreting what those business questions really are. Um, so, myth number two, only big companies need data engineers. This one is absolutely wrong. If your business uses data, big or small, you're going to need some type of data engineering. I've seen startups drown in bad Excel sheets and small businesses absolutely losing money because their data was an absolute mess. Not to mention the headache that quarterly reporting, when quarterly reporting came around and gathering all that data for accounting. It is about complexity, not about company size. So if you have data, which you do as a company, then you need a data engineer. So is your company or maybe the company that you work for guilty of any of these myths that I've covered so far, or did you ever believe one of these myths maybe yourself? Type guilty down in the chat if you've seen or experienced some of these myths in action. All right. So myth number three, that data engineering is a solo heads down job. If you don't like talking to people, you're absolutely in the wrong field. There's a stigma out there definitely for, especially for data engineers and for programmers in general, that we are head down, that it's a solo job, that we don't talk to anybody, that we don't even have the skills to talk to anybody. Um, I'm here to tell you that data engineering is absolutely a team sport. You're working with data scientists, you're working with analysts, you're working with business analysts, and project managers, and finance and marketing and sales, and all these different groups and different people. I spend half of my days translating business requests into these technical requirements, right, and real solutions to meet our business needs, meeting with analysts, and again, keeping stakeholders happy and getting them what they need to drive the business forward and to make their lives easier. That's what our jobs are all about. We are here to make the business's life easier, to make it more efficient, and to get them the data that they need to make the decisions quickly and efficiently. So, myth number four is that data engineering is all about the latest tools. Well, You're thinking, what about Spark? Is Fabric going to kill Snowflake? Which it's not. Honestly, tools come and go. Again, over 25 years, I've seen so many tools go, for sure. And some that were around for an instant, looking at you, Hadoop, um, and some that have been around forever. SSIS continues to be prominent, even in cloud compute, the age of cloud computing. So don't, tools come and go. Don't focus on the tools themselves. Focus on the skills that you need to be able to adapt quickly when those new tools come around. The best engineers, again, focus on solving the business problem first and then picking the right tool second, right? You really need to understand what that business problem is and really diagram out. Take the time to diagram and model out what you're going to do, how you're going to solve it, and then pick the tool that best fits that problem. Myth number 5 is that it is only about big data. We addressed this, a moment ago, that whether you're big or you're small, whether you're working with petabytes or you're working with megabytes, you know, that data still needs to be managed and it still needs to be tracked and probably governed. Um, so going back to, it's all about big data. It's petabytes or bust, right? That's the dream, being able to deal with petabytes of data at a time. Sometimes the ugliest and costliest problems are the small but chaotic data that we run into. So, again, don't don't focus on, if I don't have big data or if I'm not working with big data, then I'm not really a data engineer. You are a data engineer no matter what size of data that you're working with, and your company needs a data engineer no matter how much data you're working with. Whether you're working with megabytes or you're working with petabytes, you need a data engineer, and at least some type of data professional to help you manage that data. So myth number 6: just build the data warehouse and you're done, right? You probably have heard this, maybe have heard other people say that's all data engineers do. They just move data from one place to the other, they put it in the data warehouse, and then they never touch it again. The data warehouse is kind of like the fridge, but you still need the oven, you still need the knives, you still need the recipe and a chef to put it all together and make the meal. Data engineering is all about the whole end-to-end solution: ingesting, transforming, validating, securing, and delivering data that people can trust. Nikhil, what's up, man? Uh, I've not checked out VO3. You know why? Because it is like $130 a month to get a subscription to, like, Google Premium to be able to check it out. I was checking out what the cost was. Um, but I saw another tool that uses VO3, and I might grab it. Have you had a chance to check it out? I'd love to hear about it. All right. Back to our myths. So again, data engineering is all about the end-to-end solutions: ingesting, transforming, validating, securing, really that whole package, delivering data that really builds trust with your business and with your stakeholders. So myth number 7: it's low level plumbing, right? And you hear, especially from Mike, right, from the data janitor, about how, some data engineers are really just plumbers, right? They're just data plumbers and they're cleaning up all the crap. um, and sure, there's absolutely cleaning, there's plumbing, but you're also the architect. Also, a lot of times there is no data architect. You, especially as data engineers, you are the data architect. You're the safety inspector. You're the one ensuring that the governance is in place, that the data is secure, that private information is monitored and only given access to, when appropriate. And you're also the firefighter, right? When something breaks, when something goes wrong, you're that detective, you're that firefighter that's quickly figuring out the problem, fixing it, so the business then can continue their own business and make the right decisions. So, great engineers really understand the business as well as the terminology. It's so important to build up that domain knowledge, and uh, and especially as you move into your career, if you start to specialize in a specific kind of domain, right? Whether that be healthcare or telecommunications or cybersecurity, then so important. Confused between data engineer for cybersecurity, which is high salary and high demand. Please help me. I'm confused. Vlog diary. That is a great question, right? Data engineers and cybersecurity, and cybersecurity professionals both are in demand, right? Especially right now. I see a ton of jobs and about for especially for senior data engineers. From my perspective, seniors and staff engineers, I see so many of them. I see a lot of data manager positions pop up lately too. Uh, it's hard to get junior data engineer positions. Um, Generally, you're jumping in as a analyst or something like that. But as a data engineer, like the median salary for a data engineer is around that $150,000 mark. Cybersecurity professionals also make a significant amount of money. It's around that same amount, plus or minus. Um, so it's all about which one you're passionate about. The one that you're the most passionate about is the one that you're going to end up making the most money from, because you're going to make more from bonuses, you're going to make more from raises because your performance is going to be better, and so on and so forth. So that's my 2 cents there. Again, both in demand from my perspective. I worked for a cybersecurity group for a long time, and definitely have some connections there. If you want to talk to me about that more on the side. I'm from India. That doesn't matter. All across the world, cybersecurity is in demand. I'll say that in India, I think that data professionals in particular, whether it is engineering, analyst, or scientist, your competition is significantly greater than it is in the States. Um, so so there's that. That's my 2 cents. Great questions, guys. Keep them up. All right. So jumping back into some of these myths, we covered, whether or not data engineers are plumbers, whether or not we just work with moving data from one place to the other. Uh, this next myth is all about set it and forget it. And I touched on it a moment ago. But spoiler alert, your pipelines are going to break, right? It happens. Data changes, which is commonly called schema drift. Your job is never done. There's always more work to do. It kills me when there's a contract position open and it's for like 6 months, and they think that the duration is going to end and they're going to have all their stuff in place and they're going to move forward without any more need for a data engineer. The best engineers out there are constantly improving and adapting to those business needs, and businesses should understand that there's always going to be work to do. Something's always going to change. Um, because AI is trending, so I think data is huge. So jobs are huge, but confused what to do, cybersecurity or data field. But cybersecurity is in need, absolutely. Um, which do you think you should choose, data or cyber? Again, I go back to, what are you passionate about? What do you love? Do you love, that investigation of when there's do you want to be like a white hat kind of person, where you are a white hat, cybersecurity professional, where you're kind of hacking things to learn what the vulnerabilities are in different company systems? Do you want to go out and monitor and keep an eye on, cybersecurity attacks? Do you want to learn more about DDoS attacks and, zero-day attacks and all that stuff? Or do you love data? Is your love just of, I love data? Like for me, I love data. I love, you know, finding out about new data and learning about new industries and moving data from one place to the other and combining it with all these disparate sources and putting it all together and getting it all in front of somebody so that they can make a decision. And the feeling that you get when that business person on the other side of it is like, oh my God, you are a wizard. Thank you so much. And just that reward from that for me personally is why I do it. Need more salary and future proof career. Both domains in the same set. Both domains are kind of in that same salary band. At least in the US. I don't know a whole lot about um, the industry in India, but from a US perspective, they're definitely in that same kind of salary band, plus or minus 10, $15,000. Um, and as far as future proof, I think that data engineers are always going to be in need. You're always going to have to evolve. There's always, like we talked about, there's always going to be new tools. There's always going to be some new language that comes out, some new tool that comes out that you're going to have to learn. Um, and from a cybersecurity standpoint, there's always going to be somebody that is attacking another company that's trying to get information, that's trying to bring it down. There's always going to be a need for cybersecurity professionals as well. So as far as the future proof, I mean, can AI maybe eventually in the future, in the distant future, take over some data engineering? Maybe. I think we're still going to be around to monitor those things to make sure that edge cases are covered and things like that. Um, and again, there's always going to be cybersecurity attacks. I think mental peace is more important than high salary. I agree with Nikhil. Um, money is also important, so you have to weigh them. I mean, and I go back to, what are you passionate about? What do you love? You have to figure out which one you love the most. Um, I'm a big believer in doing what you love, doing the things that bring you excitement and joy, um, and and pick the one that brings you the most excitement and joy. There's always going to be something in every career, in every job that you don't like to do. Uh, documentation, that I'm talking about, you documentation. Um, so there's always going to be those types of things that have to be done that you're not going to love, but there's always, pick the one that you love the most. Great questions, guys. Great discussion. Um, very cool. So, uh, yeah, so going back to set and forget, pipelines break, data changes. The job really is truly never done, and the best engineers are constantly improving and continuously learning. I've harped on that in the past, and for those of you that are on this data path, make sure that you have a passion and a love for learning too, because it is definitely a career. Whether you are for you. Vlog Diary, regardless of which one of those career paths you choose, um, you have to have a love for continuous learning, because you need that for both of those career paths. Um, and this next one's important for both of those career paths, and that is soft skills don't matter, right? That one of the myths of data engineering, again, is that they kind of have that data engineers and a lot of programmers, software engineers, have this stigma that they don't have that ability to communicate with people, to be down to earth with people, uh, to be personable. And that's one of the biggest myths of all, right? That if you want to be irreplaceable, get good at communicating, at collaborating and solving real business problems, right? Troubleshooting. Those are the things that are really going to carry your career through all these different changes, right? All these various tool changes, all these various resource changes. Not just writing code, being able to write code and having that logic, being able to logic out those things in your brain, absolutely is a needed skill. Um, but it's a skill, and it's transferable from from one tool to the next. So Uh, I love that you all are having this kind of side chat. That's great. Super excited about that. Hope y'all could kind of get together on that. Okay, so here we go. It, remember that near miss that I talked about earlier? For those of you that maybe jumped on a little late, I was telling a little bit of a story, but early in my career, we had this pipeline that everybody thought was done. It had been running just great for like 6 months. There's been no problems. Reports were going out. Sales teams were happy. They were getting the data that they needed. Their leads were increasing. They were getting more valuable leads. Things were being scored and kind of ranked, and it really was working great. And then one day, half of those leads just vanished. All of a sudden, everything just dropped out. There was no alert. There was no warning. Everything just kind of disappeared, and it was crazy. We didn't know what was going on. Again, this pipeline had been running just fine for months. And these things happen, right? You'd be surprised, how many times a schema changes or somebody puts something in sales for some weird character that they copy and paste into Salesforce because they copy and pasted an email that absolutely screws up some data set down the line because something got parsed weird, something happened and it just threw everything off, right? Um, so, anyways, I caught this silent failure before it hit our executives, but and I built this validation check, right? And it's one of those. It's really what taught me to make sure that I build resilient pipelines, right? And that's something that I talk about in one of the videos that we released a couple weeks ago. But and honestly, this is a fix that saved a whole quarter for the business and probably honestly saved my job too. Being able to, jump in and adapt and switch priorities when a fire drill comes down the pike is absolutely a needed skill. But that's when I realized that data engineering is really a lot about people and not just pipelines, about having those relationships with your leaders, with your stakeholders, so that when something does happen, one, they feel comfortable in letting you know, hey, this data looks weird. Can you jump on it real quick? And two, so that they kind of give you a little bit of grace when something does happen. So, tell me, for those of you that are still around, what is the wildest data myth that you've run into? Or have you ever kind of, debunked your own myths that you've run into at your own company? I'd love to hear some of your stories. Again, thank you all for jumping on tonight. I really love having these conversations. Um, so, so happy that you all have that jumped on tonight and had these conversations. And again, once we get through this is the point at which we kind of do the AMA, right? Where I'm here, ask me anything about data engineering, about data science or data analysis, and happy to have those discussions, especially with AI jumping in so much. Um, So if you do want to know some more about the behind the scenes stories and some more about the advice for data engineers, be sure that you subscribe and that you come to these live sessions as well as kind of watch some of the other videos that I do. I have a series that is called Data Definitions and Disasters, where I go over some of the bigger, more complex data engineering concepts and some of my disaster stories that I've run into over the years and have seen. So be sure you check that out. Um, all right. So for those of you that are on, let me know down in the comments what questions do you have for me tonight. Love to again, really love to see people like Nikhil jump on. He's on all the time with me. I appreciate you. Vlog Diary. So excited that you're on this evening. Um, but yeah, it's a for Vlog Diary. I would say that really, as far as if you're just looking at money, it both engineering and cybersecurity are pretty comparable, at least in the states. All right. Well, I don't want to keep you all if nobody has any questions. Again, really enjoy doing these. Um, jump on, let me know what questions you have. Might hang out for just a little bit and see if any questions do roll in. But yeah, be happy to talk about my own personal wins this week. Uh, just building some automation and some new patterns for Databricks. Super excited about that. Also, super excited about some of our upcoming guests that are coming on. Um, on June 6th, I have uh, Lindsay, who has her own episode, her own show as well. She will be on, and again, Lindsay works primarily with um, nonprofits, and so I'm super excited for her to come on and talk about her experience working with nonprofits. And then we have Shane Gibson coming uh, on the following Friday at 10 p.m. So DevOps tools. I mean, obviously ADO is a big one. From a DevOps standpoint, probably important to learn Terraform from a scripting standpoint, right? Um, this is an awesome question. Uh, it Terraform becomes so important from a DevOps standpoint and getting things kind of set up and organized. Um, and then, like I said, ADO, make sure that you have a good understanding of kind of how Git integration works with various tools. Um, Let me think. Trying to look up something real quick. Mm, yeah. So it kind of goes back to like I was talking about Git, Bitbucket, GitLab, Git Guardian, and how those tools kind of integrate with, especially with Azure and AWS. Um, and CI/CD tools, again, that GitHub Actions, ADO pipelines. A lot of your ADO pipelines are going to be that Terraform containerization. So Docker is a big one there. Um, I covered Terraform. Kubernetes, it's some basics around Kubernetes are good. Kubernetes is in both Azure and AWS. uh, Grafana for some visualization as far as monitoring and logging goes. Um, and then obviously, like your upcoming question here, uh, it also makes sure Linux, right? Linux is a big one for both data engineers and DevOps engineers. Uh, so kind of bash and shell scripting to be able to automate some tasks. But those are the big ones. Uh, as far as Azure versus AWS, uh, I think that is so important to learn AWS because it gives you kind of that technical advantage. I think again, personal experience. You've heard me say this before, Nikhil, but personal experience is that AWS is a bit more technical than Azure. Um, so there's that. But also, I'll say that I saw an article this week. Let me see if I can pull it up. But Azure is kind of edging out the market. AWS, for the first time in years, has dropped below 30% of the market share. Um, Let's see if I can pull up that article real quick. 30%. Mhm. Here it is. Continue. Yeah, it's on Seeking Alpha, so I'll put the link to it in the comments. But yeah, it for the first time in years, oops, AWS has dropped below 30% market share, which is a big deal, right? Azure pushing Fabric somehow seems to have gotten it be pushing that market share, which is crazy. I wouldn't have thought that. If you had asked me if that was going to be true a couple of months back, I would have told you no. But yeah, that Seeking Alpha article there, talks about how AWS has dropped below 30% market share. Always, man. I appreciate you jumping on. Uh, but I still think, regardless of AWS or Azure, pick one of the cloud tools, even if it's GCP, right? You're getting experience that's going to be transferable from one cloud to the next. There's always going to be some intricacies between those cloud tools that are going to be different, just like there are between different flavors of SQL, right? When you move from PL SQL to Snowflake to SQL Server, each one has a little bit different flavor of SQL. The order of the syntax of the functions are a little bit different, or which functions are available are obviously different, especially as you look at things like Postgres and Snowflake um, and BigQuery. Um, so there's always going to be those kind of intricate details that are a little bit different, but the tools themselves, the um, the skills that you learn when you're studying a cloud platform, creating resources, getting digging into something like BigQuery, or if you're in AWS Redshift, or if you're in Azure, Synapse, you know SQL databases, or if you're in Databricks, Delta, right? you know Whichever the case may be, those skills are transferable from one to the other. So, continue to press on whichever route that you take. Don't stress too much about the fact that AWS is losing market share a little bit. That pendulum kind of swings back and forth, anyways, as different companies have different complexity needs. And I suspect that it will continue to swing as AI becomes a bigger and bigger part of enterprise solutions. So don't worry about that. Just pick a cloud platform, stick with it. Again, from an ADO from a DevOps standpoint, and these are tools that I would suggest that data engineers learn too. A lot of my career, I've used Docker, I've used obviously Python, I've used some Terraform, because a lot of times, so many times, we didn't have a separate DevOps engineer, right? We were the DevOps engineer. We were creating our own resources. We were creating our own, um, writing our own Terraform so that things can be consistent every time that we created new resources. We were using ADO to create those pipelines. Again, YAML files and writing those Terraform scripts so that things can be consistent. I was writing Docker containers, and I was putting Python scripts within Docker containers, and those Docker containers in AWS and Elastic services, and running them via Lambdas and cron triggers, right? Any of these words that I'm saying that you don't know what they are, put that word uh, down in the comments, and I will kind of explain what those words are. But and that's true. Anytime I'm on these videos and you hear me say a word, and you're like, "What is that?" Uh, don't don't feel bad. Uh, these words and all these different concepts. There's so much of it. It's hard to keep track sometimes. So yeah, awesome. Yeah, this is that Seeking Alpha article, that AWS cloud market share, fell below 30%. Please explain those words. Yeah. Uh, can a fresher get a job in DevOps or cloud computing? I think it's hard to jump into a DevOps job, right? I think there are some junior DevOps engineer jobs. probably more than there are junior data engineer jobs. So uh, honestly, it's still one of those things. Still one of those things that you might luck out more looking at like um, a junior software engineer position or a junior backend engineer position, and then kind of moving into that DevOps role to try to get your foot in the door and then move into that. As far as cloud computing, um, like an Azure uh, like networking engineer or a Azure data engineer or AWS or Databricks, any of those things. Again, I think that it's hard to find junior level positions in those realms. Um, you need to get your foot in the door as an analyst, as a um, sometimes as a junior DevOps engineer, sometimes as a, like I said, a junior software engineer, a junior backend engineer, and then kind of move into those roles. That's my 2 cents. Awesome. Great questions tonight. Let me know down in the comments. I'm going to explain some of these words here um, that I just went through, right? For those of you that don't know, Docker is a containerization tool. So let me maybe pull up the website here and I could show you what Docker is. But Docker is a containerization tool. What a container is kind of a virtual environment that you can load all your requirements into so that you have this kind of consistent environment with all the libraries that you need for your Python scripts, um, the right Python, consistent Python version for those scripts to run. Um, Things like that. And so you could create these containerizations and run various scripts in those containerizations. And people even make these virtual environments for full software uh, platforms, right? Um, I knew of a company that helped do audits that they containerized their whole software platform that helped companies kind of evaluate like their SOC 2 requirements and things like that, and their all their various government uh, requirements that they had to pass. I'm going to share my screen. Um, Docker. So this is Docker, right? Again, Docker is important because you can create that containerization, uh, and it's something that is important to learn as a data engineer, especially as you move into your career. And it's one of those tools, one of those skills that you'll learn that is transferable, right? It's transferable because software engineers use Docker, data engineers use Docker, DevOps engineers use Docker. Um, so so important to learn that one. I don't want to remove me. So so that's one of them. What were some of the other words that I was using? You'll have to remind me, Nikhil, when I was rambling on about what you needed as a um, DevOps engineer. Uh, hopefully you all know what Git is. Git is a repository tool, right? Um, let's pull up GitHub. Right. So GitHub it is is a repository, right, where you could store all of your um, all of your code, right? You could store your code, you could see different things, right? This one's just like this script that's hitting this Marvel API, um, Marvel being comic books, right? And here's one, that I've got a script hitting this CoinGecko API, which is some what's it called? Cryptocurrency, right? It's kind of a cryptocurrency exchange platform. Uh, so you could pull various kind of quotes, crypto quotes, um, things like that. So there's Git. There is Docker. There is what else? What else were we talking about here? There is Kubernetes. Kubernetes is another containerization um, tool. You'll hear it, in Azure. You have AKS, which is Azure Kubernetes Service. Um, there's Terraform. Terraform's a big one, right? Let's uh, Terraform is a language. It's a infrastructure as a code language where you're writing scripts, and in order to create resources, create objects that in a consistent manner, right? And then you hit build these things called YAML files, and YAML files hold. Yeah, share your GitHub profile, man. YAML files hold the requirements, right? Kind of the variables that you would feed into, um, in this case, your Terraform code. Um, so here's Terraform. Um, I'll accept all for now, but yeah, Terraform is super important. And this is kind of the Terraform icon, right? Um, So Terraform super important, especially as a DevOps engineer. And when you move from maybe a data engineer into a data architect, Terraform becomes incredibly important in building those consistent patterns so that you're always creating resources in a consistent manner. Consistency is so incredibly important. Documentation of that consistency is so incredibly important. Um, so to keep those things in mind, especially when it comes to standards, your both your data and your architecture standards, your all of your governance, all of your all of your code, obviously, all of these things need to be documented. It's so incredibly important. You said this is my GitHub profile, and then you didn't put your profile. All right. Um, let's see. What else? Um, Monitoring and logging. Again, we have Grafana. Um, oops, I hit the caps. Um, so Grafana is this fully managed observability stack, right? That helps you with monitoring and logging of your data pipelines. In addition, there's this other tool called Orchestra. Um, so I'm going to show you this. Um, this guy is that I've had a couple of personal just conversations with him, um, and he's great. But you know, see if we could. But here he's talking about a little bit about building pipelines. Here you see he's using YAML definition in order to build out some of his stuff. Again, YAML definitions are used kind of across the board, not just for Terraform, but in other tools as well. Uh, but he's kind of you see here he's in VS Code. Um, and kind of talking through Orchestra versus Airflow from an orchestration standpoint. But the cool thing about Orchestra, kind of as we have him talking here, is that it has some observability and monitoring built into it, right? Here he's showing Orchestra, right? That's one of the pipelines in Orchestra. I don't know if you could hear him. Um, but you could see in here, yeah, again, this is Orchestra. You could see all of the kind of the flows of how everything's orchestrated through, and that's all fed into Orchestra when it goes out and reads all these scripts. And so it is really a cool tool if you haven't checked it out, especially for orchestration. Um, don't want to overcrank too much on this, but I wanted to show you a little bit about the observability here. And here he has charts about how how many records have transferred in. Look, we have uh, total assets, managed assets. We have the red and the green as far as passing and failing. We have there's some he had shown me about uh, query cost. This is super important when you're talking about cloud computing, being able to track and monitor different query costs so that you could identify that there might be something going on with one of your queries, maybe something changed and you accidentally have some you some a bad query or a bad join somewhere that's causing increased cost. So 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 incredibly, oh look, there's me. um that's probably us now. So let's see if he talks about DAGs a little bit, but yeah, check out Orchestra if you get a chance. Super cool. uh I'd love to have him. I might work with him, see if he could jump on with us sometime. So that's Orchestra. uh Again, as far as monitoring goes, and orchestra and uh you see here, there's some cost. It tracks the cost, it tracks the resource usage. Really gives you a good insight into your ecosystem. uh and so does Grafana. I mean, Grafana does a good job with it too. I really like Orchestra uh as well. So, and then Linux, of course, Linux is so important across the board for any type of coding, um, for any type of coding profession, right? Whether you're a data engineer, software engineer, across the board, Linux is super important, and being able to navigate within Linux at a bare minimum, especially if you're getting into AWS. So much of AWS is EC2 containers, and EC2 containers are on Ubuntu, all right? And so it's on in a Linux container. So understand being able to get in and maneuver in and out of a Vim, right? Which is just a kind of a editor, right? It's the Linux's editor. Being able to get in and out of Vim and being able to edit those code scripts and run code scripts in EC2 container, which is going to be Linux, is super important as well. So don't, whether, again, especially for DevOps, um, and also for data engineers. Again, these are all things that data engineers need as well. And I say that because there are um, so many of your roles out there. There won't be another DevOps engineer, especially for like mid market and small medium sized businesses. Until you get to like an enterprise role, you're not going to have a DevOps engineer there to help you out. You're not going to have another architect there to help you out. You might be the sole data engineer for the entire company. And no, you have to kind of have this whole breadth of knowledge and not as much of the depth, because you're having to build out this breadth of knowledge. So important to kind of don't spread yourself thin, um, but focus on having at least kind of that bare minimum, right? And I talk about that in my um, in my data honeycomb, right? For those of you that don't know, uh, you know, for us, for Gamble Data Engineering, we have um, a data honeycomb, and so I'm going to share that with you. Boom, boom, boom. Roadmap. Um, show that with you now. And so we have this honeycomb, right? And so here in the center, you see that we have the basic SQL, intermediate SQL, advanced SQL, and then we kind of branch out Python, Linux. These are things that we've talked about, right? Um, We have understanding data types and APIs, right? This is where that DSA that you all asked me so much about comes into play, right? So data structures and algorithms. Uh, Understanding data types and APIs is important. And in this honeycomb that I built, it's important to understand that the concept here is you start at the heart of the honeycomb. You start in the center and you work your way out, just like a beehive would, build upon itself in order to get bigger and stronger and for the hive to continue to thrive. You have to do that as a person in order to continue to thrive as a data professional. Um, and you'll notice that on the left hand side we have the more technical skills, and on the right hand side we kind of have the more soft skills, right? um, so important to have these technical skills. Again, SQL is immensely important in any of the data professions. I do have Excel on here. Absolutely, you need to understand Excel because you're going to have business partners that one insist on using Excel. They're going to take your data, put it in Excel, and they're going to manipulate it. You're also going to run into situations where people have been using Excel for years to manually do a bunch of data work, and you're going to have to take that and integrate it and make it into a production ready service, right? And so you're going to have to figure out what they did in Excel, how they did it, all those different various functions and equations that they use there, and translate them into your production world, into your data environment. And so being able to understand Excel and how it works and the ins and outs of that are important. Power BI, and you'll notice in red here, I have a couple things on the outside here that are red, and they're red because they kind of relate more to either data science or analytics. Data analytics being the Power BI and Tableau piece, obviously, data science being the predictive modeling and machine learning. But important for you to know and have at least understand those concepts. We start getting into an intermediate and advanced Python up here in the top right hand corner. We talk about the soft skills, right? Teamwork, being sociable. This is again one of those data myths that we talked about, is that data engineers are not sociable. Well, it's important to learn how to be sociable. uh, Again, communication skills up in the kind of the as we work towards this side. These are more concepts, right? Cybersecurity and AI. um, and this whole bottom corner here, leadership, especially if you're looking into moving into data leadership at some point, into a director role, into a VP role. Learning leadership as you move through your career is important. Even if you are going to stay as as a individual contributor and you want to move into like a staff position at some point, leadership is important. And being able to encourage others, being able to mentor others, being able to um, influence others through your work and how you communicate with them becomes important. And those are those leadership skills that you'll have to, develop over time. Um, and then this bottom right, we have our data modeling, data governance, data warehousing, storage, and data architecture. And the whole thing encompasses what you need to know as a data engineer. It encompass every individual thing that you'll ever have to know as a data engineer? Absolutely not. There's no way that one single person can know everything about data engineering all the time. It's never going to happen. You're not going to run into that person. But it's important for you to continue to learn and build upon your skills, and continue to build that depth and that breadth of knowledge as you move through your career. Awesome. I've seen a bunch of people come in and go, and not say hello. So say hello. Let me know that you're here down in the comments. Let me know what questions you have. We've had a fantastic conversation this evening. Have really enjoyed it. Um, Hopefully you have too. Got to talk about several tools: Grafana, Orchestra, Docker. Obviously, GitHub is so incredibly important to being able to learn how to integrate GitHub with Databricks, with ADF, with Azure. I mean, ADF, obviously Azure, but with AWS. it being able to integrate uh, GitHub into those tools, get into those tools is incredibly important. And then, for Nikhil, as you learn, as you get into DevOps, so incredibly important, I think, to learn ADO and Terraform and understand what YAML files are and all that. And again, let me know down in the comments if there's a word that I say that you're like, what does that word mean? Put the word down in the comment, and I will. I'll get to it. Well, guys, it has been just about an hour. Our hour is almost up to this evening. Let me know what final questions that you may have, whether it is about some of those data engineering myths that maybe you're not sure, maybe we didn't cover, that you're not sure. Is this really true? Is this all a data engineer is? Or do data engineers really have to do such and such? Let me know down in the comments, and I'd be happy to answer that question. And then, if you have any questions about data engineering or the data professions as a whole, let me know. And again, thank you all so much for jumping on tonight. I've seen a ton of you jump on. I really appreciate you being here. Nikhil, thank you so much for always having these conversations with me, always asking the great questions. Thank you, Vlog Diary, for jumping in here and asking some great questions as well about cybersecurity and data engineering. Thank you both so much for jumping on and having this conversation with me this evening. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. Uh, and like I said, we do these on usually on Fridays. I've been doing them midday as well as kind of this time at night as well. We are going to have one on the 6th with with Lindsay, and let me actually bring up Lindsay's YouTube page so you can see who she is if you want to check her out. I know she recently did a video, so be easy to find her here. Boom, boom, boom. Well, I said that it would be easy to find her, but apparently I follow too many people. Or apparently, well, a lot of people put videos out on Fridays. Just search subscriptions. Wow, struggling here. Well, let me pull up some data. Can't find either. There he is. Shane Gibson. I share just Shane's website here real quick. We have Shane Gibson that's going to be on the show here in a few weeks on June 13th. Shane, he runs his own podcast as well. He also has a new book out. Super excited about that. Really talking about just agile stuff. And again, go out, check his podcast out. Go out and check his website out. You check out his book here. Information product canvas and agile data guides to information product canvas, capturing data and information requirements in a repeatable way so stakeholders love them and data teams can build from them. A really long title, but really packed full of some great information. I promise Shane didn't pay me for that spot, but wanted to kind of show you his website. And Shane will be here, like I said, in a few weeks. And there is Shane's website. Super excited to host him. And alternatively, I'm going to jump on his podcast here in a few weeks. And we're going to talk about different data patterns that you could use in your own career. And so how important data patterns are to build, to document, so that you have that consistency that I was talking about earlier. So he and I are going to kind of swap collabs in a few weeks. And then if I could find Lindsay here real quick, let's see if we could find Lindsay. Not Lindsay Lohan. Let's see if we can find Lindsay. I just followed too many people, apparently. Lindsay, the data coach. There she is. She's the data coach. She focuses on nonprofit. Super excited. She goes in a few weeks. But Lindsay is awesome. Have had a few conversations with her. She also has her own YouTube channel. Doesn't have a whole lot of followers, so go out and check her out. She has some really great insights on working with nonprofits and kind of the the private sector. Public sector, I always get those swapped. Public sector and super excited to have her on. Again, she talks about really some basic concepts dealing with data fragmentation for nonprofit organizations. You'll see a lot of her stuff is around nonprofits, but definitely still applies to anybody, even if you're not dealing with nonprofits. So she's going to be on the 6th. Super excited to have her, and we're going to have a great discussion then. So again, if anybody has any final questions, we'll wrap it up. And super excited to have you all on tonight. Super excited about our guests that are going to be on in a few over the next month, and we continue to grow. Right, we have 2,500 community members now. Super excited about that. For those of you that are not part of our Discord channel, be sure that you jump on our Discord channel as well, and I'll drop that link in the comments, and y'all could jump on that Discord channel if you're interested in that. So again, super excited that we continue to grow. Super excited that y'all jumped on with me this evening. This seems to be a pretty popular time. There's the Discord for those of you that want to jump on our Discord. But yeah, look forward to continuing to have these episodes, continuing to have these discussions. Looking forward to Shane and Lindsay coming on over the next month, and looking forward to jumping on Shane's Agile Data podcast as well. So again, have a fantastic weekend. Until next time, keep your pipelines clean and your queries lean. Thank you all.